Guys, E3 is at the end of its rope. This thing is on full-on life support. Sony left a few years back, Nintendo flirted with E3 for a bit and then left to make the world's middest directs the last couple of years, and now Xbox is leaving the nest. Hell, Ubisoft even said they're too good for E3 now. This ship is sinking so fast that I started writing this video when I heard Ubisoft pulled out, and by the time I finished writing it, the whole event had been cancelled. I feel like a lot of people are enjoying watching the event crumble into dust, and I guess it's always been associated with cringe compilations and recently with doxing people, so it's not surprising that people are kind of enjoying the flustercluck around this event, but goddammit, I'm sad about this. Am I the only one who's sad about this? I grew up wanting to someday go to E3 with my brother. We'd watch them every year and say, wow, look at all these games that our parents definitely aren't gonna get us. Ooh, can't wait to not be allowed to play that game. And I'd say it was one of the most exciting times of the year for me. Everyone says E3 was like gaming Christmas, but for me it was just regular Christmas, because we didn't celebrate regular Christmas in my house. For 3 days straight, you just get article after article, showcase after showcase, and now we've literally had one E3 of the last 4 not get cancelled. It just bums me out to think that the shutters are closing on this whole concept. I think back to some of my favorite E3 moments, like when Sean Layden walked out with a Crash Bandicoot shadow, when Hideo Kojima did the same thing with this light bridge, but then he just started walking past it because he didn't give a damn, when that one Ubisoft guy did this. Okay, yeah, maybe we should just kill this thing. I like all the triumphant moments, like when PlayStation joked about game sharing to make fun of Xbox, or back when Bethesda showed that they could actually make games and not just PNGs. And I also love all the yikes moments, like when EA screwed up the teleprompter for that poor YouTuber, or Sony announced the PS3 price to absolute silence, or however I'm meant to describe something like this. I'm pretty sure that even if somehow, some way E3 crawls out of the grave and manages to continue in some capacity after this year, these kinds of showcases and moments are gone. The future of E3 doesn't look like the past, and that's probably necessary, but it's also kind of sad. What's also kind of crazy to think about is that just 2 conferences before the first canceled one, E3 was alive and healthy at full strength. We got one of its messiest presentation-wise, but in retrospect, most consistently great conferences with Sony Showcase, and everything seemed to be going great. And then the next year, the first blow was dealt when Sony confirmed that it wouldn't be attending the 2019 conference. They used a lot of the same language as I've noticed Jeff Keighley likes using, the fact that they wanted to innovate and reach out to their community in new ways, and to do that, they needed to distance themselves from E3. That's a sentiment that's been shared a lot since. A lot of the internal noise around E3 is that it's very old guard. It's very expensive to represent yourself there. It takes a lot of individual planning while still trying to adhere to the schedules of everyone else in the industry, and it's very inaccessible as a massive live event in LA that the rest of the world can just peer into. E3 was no longer helping the industry like it used to, so it was only a matter of time before the industry stopped helping it. And so Sony decided to strike off on their own, and they had a pretty successful post-split glow-up. They started putting out states of play every so often, and ever since leaving E3, they've produced some of the best full-sized showcases arguably ever. They also got their 1 year ahead of the curve, since 2020's E3 conference fell victim to COVID, and everyone else realized, oh, wait a second, we could just do this all online and people would still totally watch it. Once that happened, things sort of blew up. Everyone and their mother had a standalone online showcase, usually multiple a year, and the Summertime Game Showcase event sweepstakes became a free-for-all. Gamescom tried to increase its presence, IGN tried to coin the Summer of Gaming, which I still don't really know what that is, and probably the most successful of the bunch is Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest. Jeff has been trying to create a more robust version of what E3 should be in his eyes over the last 4 years, and while the games that get shown vary in quality from year to year, the format itself has definitely gotten better each time. Last year had a mini show floor and demos and a tighter schedule. It basically aped a lot of what made E3 great to begin with and took it for its own. If E3 really was like Christmas, then Jeff Keighley is the Grinch. If that movie ended with the Grinch starting like Christmas 2 down the block. I mean, look at his tweet literally minutes after E3 got canceled. This is a man with no remorse. But I will say that while SGF has embraced a newer outlook, it's still very much a work in progress. Some of its problems are definitely going to be fixed by just maintaining a more consistent presence throughout the years, establishing the same trust that E3 once had, and some of it comes down to how the event actually adjusts from here. So what does it need to double down on, and what does it need to change to carry on the spirit of this once great gathering of people with zero social skills? I think the biggest thing SGF has going for it right now is that it's very easy to fit into. You don't need to work with a group like the ESA and fit into an exact time slot. You don't need to set up booths and rent out convention halls. You can just stick people in front of a green screen, and you have full freedom over how long your show goes and whether you want to push it back so developers have time to finish their presentations. As long as the showcase is in the summer, you can slap on a Summer Game Fest sticker and there you go, you're part of the team. The issue with this is that if everything's Summer Games Fest, nothing is. It starts feeling less like an actual event and more just a reminder that, hey, it's summer and here's some games. Like, Okay, thank you. I mean, my calendar could have told me the same thing, but I appreciate it, I think. The catch-22 here is that the benefit of SGF is casual, general branding, which is why it's so easy to get companies on board, but for it to feel like a true event, the epicenter of games the way E3 was, it needs to be easier to define and point to as a moment, because that's what'll get fans on board. SGF's format got better last year when they tried to push it as a week-long thing instead of a generic tag that lasted months, but there was still SGF branding for stuff that didn't fit in that timeline, so it still feels a bit too loose. This is generally the worst thing about this new wave of digital events. They're so random and inconsistent. A lot of the times directs or states of play don't have enough meat on their bones to justify how often they're put out, and bigger events feel like they have no rules. Sony does 2 straight years of showcases at roughly the same time and then skips a year and is coming back a little bit earlier this summer. There's no real structure to it. Obviously you could argue that if they didn't think they had enough to show last year that it's better they just skip it than force out a show, but I'd also say if they took away the states of play from that year, they probably could have just put out one really solid showcase in the summer. I hope that's the direction that we go, back to a condensed set of dates where most of this stuff happens, because I think the industry does recognize the benefit of having all of this stuff in one place. It's actually kind of hilarious because all these companies were trying to ride off the E3 2023 hype timing-wise, but just didn't want to actually be part of E3, because they knew the buzz of a big public show brings with it more attention and excitement, but also they didn't want to deal with the ESA. Nintendo's always got a summer direct going, Ubisoft confirmed that they will have a June showcase, just not at E3, Xbox confirmed the same thing, and Jeff Grubb, one of the most reliable gaming insiders, also claimed a while ago that Sony would be hosting a showcase to announce their second phase of PS5 games just ahead of E3. It honestly plays out like they're just bitter exes whose friends are trying to hang out with them, but they don't want to be in the same room together. A tighter schedule and physical presence helps get a stronger community around these events. Just look at Phil Spencer's thoughts on the expo. E3 is just, to me, one of the seminal moments of gaming. I love the history of going down to LA, thousands of people there, getting to see great new things, getting to see people in the industry, the fan events that we've had. I definitely want that to continue. But also I want to do my show 2 days before the actual event because the E3 show floor simply cannot handle the raw computing power necessary to run Starfield at 20 frames a second. Phil clearly likes the idea of something like E3, just maybe not actually E3. I do think there's something to salvage from the Expo's event format, even if the constraints were what killed it to begin with. And I do think for SGF you can land on a shorter 3 to 4 day schedule where everyone benefits, especially if companies have more freedom with their format. There may be some straggler events that get pushed a few weeks, but in 2023 the biggest publishers without full coordination have all planned to release showcases around the same time anyways, so I'm sure with a little bit of planning we can narrow this down even farther as the years go on. I think one of the things that I'll miss the most about E3 is that it kind of forced these big companies to come down to our level. It's what produced some of the stupidest moments, but also some of the most genuine ones. E3 was goofy, but that was good. I liked seeing all these stuck-up executives throw on snapbacks and talk about how you should play their new game, no cap. But then you'd also get these big elegant reveals and performances and people who were excited to wow the audience with something new. Digital events are kind of dry looking, very corporate, very flavorless. They're at their best when they just let the games do the talking. And hey, if your games are great, I'm not going to be complaining in the moment, okay? That is the only part of this that really matters, but it's kind of fun when these things feel like parties or presentations and not just a few minutes of forced banter away from being a slideshow for shareholders.
But I'm no magician. I'm just a guy that knows PowerPoint.
I've noticed that SGF has really bright colors and a solid theme in its marketing and main show, but then not much else fits into that theme. And I think Keighley needs to work with his partners to let them keep the majority of their control, but still feel like it's a genuine part of SGF. A huge part of that is timing, like I mentioned, but it's also stuff like having similar color themes, or even just acknowledging that the event that you're seeing is part of Summer Games Fest. I think outside of Keighley himself, we might not see many live showcases anymore and are stuck with these robotic digital formats, and that sucks. But anything that shows a little bit of life and isn't just all business would be very welcome. Try to incorporate the digital audience somehow, get creative with the way games are being presented. I mean, we're talking about video games, for God's sake. Be a little playful. I've also gone on record saying that I like the general concept of the SGF kickoff, but it's way too long, and right now how it's presented, it feels like the entirety of SGF. Everything around it seems peripheral. Considering it's supposed to be the opening kickoff event, it really does just feel like the whole thing. In my ideal version of Summer Games Fest, and I'm aware that not all of this might be possible, at least in the next few years, but we can spitball. I'd make the kickoff show about an hour long as a big blanket, here's a bunch of stuff from a bunch of different companies. And if you can get partners like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, Ubi, EA, etc. to agree to showcase times in the following week, show a tease from at least one game for each of them, which will get more information at the dedicated showcases. Kickoff has never been my favorite Jeff Keighley event, mainly because it spreads so thin, but if it actually felt like the opening act to the rest of the event, then it'd work great. I'd also add a 30-minute closing act that'd come at the end of the week after the conferences, maybe one that includes the end of the show awards awards voted on by fans. And an ideal case here would be if you had a big third-party game like Armored Core that other companies like Microsoft and PlayStation wouldn't mind backing up together, and you teased it throughout the week at different shows. Maybe a random 15-second cryptic video that shows up at kickoff, then another at the Microsoft show, then another at the Sony show, and finally at the end of this 30-minute closer we get a trailer that's been teased this whole week. Just some kind of idea to unify the event and give it an actual start, middle, and end would be great. I'm aware that this is kind of a fairy tale, idealistic pitch that probably runs into dozens of logistical issues. I'm sure Jeff Keighley would kill to be able to do this stuff, but it can still be something that we work towards, right? Maybe the biggest mistake that E3 made to end up the way it is was not expanding in the right way. E3 wasn't a global thing, it was a localized thing that people could peer into through their laptop screens around the world. I'm sure being at E3 was great and I always wanted to go, but you only get a taste of it if you aren't in LA. SGF, on the other hand, started as a global digital show, and while I think it's smart of Keighley to have started building up the physical end of things, having a show floor with demos that press could access and play new games, preserving another part of that E3 experience, the actual genesis of what SGF is the chance to actually innovate on stuff that E3 couldn't do. I want to see more global demos that anyone can access. I want to see devs with virtual presentations where you can pop in and maybe ask questions on Twitch or something so it feels like you're at the booths. I want to see an SGF game jam. I want it to feel like I'm actually part of SGF even if I'm not there. E3 kind of sold the promise to fans of this big event where everything in video games happened and you could even be a part of it if you were lucky, but it's dying because it refused to evolve and act on that promise. In its wake are a bunch of less established and less well-defined events, but if they manage to take the right things from the long-standing expo and adapt it to better suit the digital medium, we might end up with something that actually fulfills that promise.